Hey everybody, welcome to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. Make a play, Canada's choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies. David Alter alongside Paul Hendrick, recapping. It's really a bye week podcast. The Leafs are off. You know, they ended the, I guess, unofficial first half because they're at 51 games right now, so you can't really call it that. But a lot of people look at the first half as the All-Star break, and Henny. It ends on a losing note to the Boston Bruins, which, you know, is going to be a loss that they kind of stay with for a little bit as they kind of enjoy the breaks, as one does during this mandated bye week that the NHL has established. But what can you take from that last game, and what do the Leafs kind of learn from that as far as measuring stick goes as the Leafs move forward here?
Well, Dave, big picture. Leafs have a 67% win percentage after those 51 games, fifth best record in the National Hockey League. They've done so without the majority of their blue line in the lineup at one point or another. Jake Muzzin, entire season. TJ Brody, 22 games. Mo Riley, 15 games. Timothy Liljegren, 11 games. Rasmus Sandin, 5 games. I mean, that's 104 man games alone on the blue line. And I'm not even going to get into Austin Matthews. You know, it sounds like excuses, but it's legit. None of the other contenders in the top 5 have had man games lost like that. And I think for Toronto to be where they are, given all they've missed, I'm pretty happy about their record. But what it needs to be done is to be more competitive against teams like Tampa Bay and Boston. And I think that game against Boston gave us an indication. In fact, the last 2 games against Boston, that something will have to be done. And again, first round playoff series are not won in January or February. They are won in mid-April and onward. So lots of time to get better, but not that much time when you consider how quickly the trade deadline's coming upon us. But the Leafs do need to add to move a step up to be competitive with the likes of the Bruins, Carolina Hurricanes, who both, by the way, have not lost a lot of people in terms of injuries. Good for them. The Leafs have found a way to deal with it, still be competitive. So I don't take much from that last game, although I was just disappointed with the way it ended. And I was disappointed with the way Ilya Samsonov played that night. I thought he could have been better. Unfortunately, he wasn't.
Yeah, and Ilya Samsonov after the game kind of admitting, you know, even though he didn't practice for those 2 days, he was a little bit under the weather, and that could have explained a little bit. Remember, the workload is heavily increased, especially with Matt Murray out. We should get more clarity later this week in terms of how long he'll be out with an ankle injury. But you talked about the playoffs and where the Leafs are, and I want to stick on that note for a little bit, because during this All-Star break, as the top players were in South Florida, you know, there's a lot of talk away from the game about issues with the game. And Sidney Crosby brought it up. Nathan MacKinnon brought up their lack of enthusiasm for the current playoff format right now, which has been in place since the 2013-14 season. And you know, Sidney Crosby says he'd rather see it go back to 1 versus 8. Nathan MacKinnon says, you know, it's kind of silly that it's going to be Toronto and Tampa again when you look at the fact that it's the 4th and 5th best teams right now in terms of points percentage for the whole league, not just conference or anything like that, but for the whole league. And perhaps it's even unfair to Boston too, because after Boston advances, when it's down to the round of 8, they're going to have a pretty tough opponent in round number 2. And so I wasn't going to write about this, but yesterday I decided I can't get all my thoughts on this in just a Twitter thread, so I'm going to write a 1,700 word article about this playoff format, how it kind of got started, and how there were problems with 1 versus 8 as well. Remember, as you recall, covering the Maple Leafs, especially in the early 2000s, I remember the Leafs had the 2nd or 3rd best record in the entire league in 2004, but because they were giving seeds to divisional rounds, they had a tough opponent like the New York Islanders in 2002 when they should have been higher up, and that went to Game 7 to the 3rd period before the Leafs finally pulled that one out. And then other situations when they played the Philadelphia Flyers in 2004,
Exactly.
got eliminated.
Exactly.
They had the better record, but were the lower seed. And so they They didn't have home ice advantage. Anyway, there's been issues all around. I want to get your take. I kind of went to just either go 1 through 8, 1 through 16, forget the seeding, but even go one better. Pick your opponent. If you're going to go 1 through 8 and Boston has the best record, you want to have these teams late in the season play for something and feel like 2 through 4 actually means something. Let them win the right to pick their opponent. I went back and I looked since this divisional format, since 13-14, the President's Trophy winners have gotten to the conference final one time since then. Like it really hasn't incentivized the best team. And I'm just curious if you think this needs a complete rework, because this seems like it was the only reason they went from 6 divisions to 4 in the first place was because Atlanta moved to Winnipeg. And then you had 2 teams in the East in Detroit and Columbus where they couldn't agree on which one would be fair to go from the West to the East. So they both did. And you had 16 and 14 for a while before this expansion. And it feels like this whole playoff format was just born out of geographical inconveniences that are no longer there.
You nailed it right in the head right there. And I'll be honest, I agree with Sid Crosby. I think it should be 1 to 8. I think you award the teams who played well during the regular season to give them some sort of break in the postseason so that come the 4th round in the Stanley Cup final, you technically could have the 2 best teams who are there. I think it's just crazy that, teams like Toronto, Boston, Tampa will have to meet each other through the first couple of rounds to get through to the conference final and eventually to the Stanley Cup final. But by that point in time, they may be all beat up. I know the regional rivalries are good. Nothing is going to be perfect, but the system they've got in place right now is not, where a team like Toronto, a team like Tampa pretty much know they're going to be playing each other 2-3 months in advance. I'd like to see the 1 versus 8. I'd like to see all of that. Again, any suggestion is imperfect, but I just think that great records through the regular season should be awarded. And if you've snuck into that 8th seed somehow late in the season, your reward's going to be playing the top seed in your conference, I guess, as it is. Maybe it means getting rid of the regional groupings and you have a balanced schedule, but 16 teams all in the one conference and, 16 others in the other conference, and you go from there. It's not perfect. I don't know what you think. I haven't read your article yet. I assume it's not out yet.
No, it's out. But don't worry. Okay. I don't take offense. Yeah, it's out. It's just I make the case for pick your own opponent in addition to all this, because in an age now with the balanced schedule, I think as much as I think that the regional rivals are there, you can create them yourself. I mean, look, Toronto and Winnipeg only play twice a year, and that's as intense as it gets.
Oh yeah.
I mean, with the exception of the last game, right? So I think these can be born. I think if you're the best record and you see a team that's seeded 8th go on an 11-game winning streak to get there as the best team in the NHL, you should have the right to avoid that matchup. Like, you have an analytical team. You can look you can pick a team for whatever reason you want. You can say, look, we're Boston. We were primed for a long run. This team is the closest to us geographically, and they've had a massive amount of injuries. Let's get them in the first round, even though they're ranked 3 spots higher than the team that went red hot to get in at the very end. I think that properly rewards the team there. Now, the argument I heard against that is you're creating bulletin board material.
Oh,
so
yeah.
what? So what? So what? Isn't the whole point to gain interest and to increase the rivalries? Doesn't this do that? Also, it's a huge moneymaker. You have a selection Saturday or a selection Sunday, a half-an-hour show that everyone's tuning into after the playoffs to see who meets what, similar to what the NCAA does with their college selection Sundays. Like, I think that's just, it's a no-brainer. But anyway, even if they take that and they limit it, saying that, it's got to be only from a certain pool of teams, I still think it adds more to what's happening now. Here's the other thing. When they made these 4 divisions, Toronto-Tampa is not a close geographical rivalry. the whole reason the Florida teams were put in this Atlantic division, the whole purpose of it was to give them more snowbird home dates, right? And then so it made sense when it was a 30-team league and there were only 7 teams in the division. So you had 4 opponents, 5. But then when they went to 31 and they went to 32 teams, you're seeing now that Calgary and Edmonton are only playing each other 3 times because there's an imbalance. So that's gone. Like there's just no reason for it now. It's the schedule's too balanced that I don't think it really matters. Anyway, so I'm a proponent to going to 1 to 8 as well, but adding some element of pick your own opponent. I think you want to make the regular season mean something, give them the best rights to choose their path, because I think that properly does reward the best teams. Not since the Chicago Blackhawks in the lockout shortened 13 season did a President's Trophy winner go all the way and win the whole thing. But anyway, so there was that. Henny, we talked about this off air, the All-Star Skills Competition.
Ouch.
This got a lot of I guess negativity. Like I missed it, but I watched all the highlights. I decided to give it a watch, and I don't know. I felt like they were just leaning too much into hockey pop culture that people already know about. I didn't see how this was going to get new fans. Maybe for the kids that were there, it was entertaining. But apart from that, it just kind of seemed to go on and on. There just didn't seem to be a lot of flow. Cringe was a lot of the words that I heard from friends of mine who were there and watched it. And it's unfortunate because I actually watched some of the highlights from the AHL All-Star Game in Laval, and that looked great. Yes. And I never thought I would say that. I never thought I would say the total opposite there. And I don't know if that's just because it's in a hockey-centric format, or if it's because it's AHL players who actually are going to give it their all. Like there's a lot there. I don't know, Henny, how do you fix this? What can be done about this?
Well, listen, I give credit to the NHL marketing people. They're trying their best. They're trying to come up with something unique, but I think they've gone so far to one side that they've got to come back and just go back to the basics, especially with this event coming to Toronto next year. Joe Bowen and I co-hosted the NHL All-Star Skills in 2000. I was, along with Mike Toth, co-host of the American Hockey League Skills in St. John's, Newfoundland, 8 to 10 years ago. In that AHL All-Star weekend, the AHL All-Stars played a Swedish elite team in a game, and the Swedish elite team was on their break over there. They came over. They were given a lot of money to come over and play, and it was a real entertaining game. The AHL just blew away the Swedish squad. It wasn't even close, but still, it was unique. And I look back to 2000 as well. That was the World versus the National Hockey League. And they did a great job. We had Pat Quinn, Roger Nielsen coaching, Joel Quenneville, Scotty Bowman, Sundin, Yuskevich on one side, Cujo playing on the other side. It had a real Toronto feel for it. And I think hockey fans next year are not going to want the gimmicks and Ovi's kid coming out onto the ice. Let's just play some hockey. Let's just see some skills. The total negativity about the skills, and I look back to, I think it was rapid fire on Trevor Kidd, hyperextending his knee and missing a great part of the season after that. I think it impacted his career. You don't want to see anybody get hurt, but I think you've got to get back. Just look at what the American Hockey League did in Laval, as you mentioned, and just do that. Just do that.
I'm with a happy, no, it's okay. I'm with a happy compromise of stuff. My only issue was everything they leaned into was just kind of like the David Pastrnak Happy Gilmore thing. Like that's been done to death. People know that hockey reference. If I'm watching basketball's All-Star Game, and that one does go a lot like that as well, but they're not leaning into stuff people already know about. Like they're trying to be creative and really do something very different. You know, the one in Vegas where they actually shot pucks in the fountain, didn't mind that. It was different. It was different. It was a new way to do accuracy, and it was a way to incorporate the setting. Had no problem with it. I saw a news report where someone's like, yeah, they should shoot pucks off the CN Tower and see if they can hit home plate in Rogers Center. I'm like, do you not understand that that's like incredibly dangerous and not at all possible? Like, there's just no way. Like, there's netting. There's already dangers when ice falls off the thing, and that's why they have netting. And like, you can't do that. Like, it's not possible. So, yeah, I don't know what they do with it. It's good that it's in Toronto. I think they'll kind of go back to basics with it. I do have some. I was 18. Well, I was turning 18 when the All-Star Game was here in 2000.
Yeah.
That was a good time. The Leafs were pretty good at the time. The building was only a year old at that point.
Yes.
So there was a lot of excitement. Yeah, there was a lot of excitement. Yeah, it was at February 99 when it opened. So February around that time would have been the All-Star Game. So there was a lot of excitement, even just for the building. Like, I like when a city gets it because they're christening a new building or whatever. Remember, this All-Star thing is going to happen because of the World Cup of Hockey that was originally talked about going to be happening in that period just didn't happen. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know. I really would like to see. I don't want to see the All-Star Game necessarily go away, but I would love to see it just happen once every 4 years at this point and to do other things. Like the Olympics, of course, is one. The World Cup of Hockey and moving that to a mid-season thing, I think would be a great idea. And also a Ryder Cup, something that's similar to North America versus the world, but something that can incorporate the world for real in that regard, where there's actual real money at stake. Like, I know there was $1 million at stake for the winning team for this All-Star, but like, look, when the players are making what they're making, you divide that by 44 people and plus, it really wasn't like they were playing for much of anything in that. So I really would like to see that. The 3-on-3, it was kind of interesting. The only other thing I didn't like, I did watch the game, but the jerseys looked too similar that it was hard to tell who was on whose team for a lot of it. I don't know if you saw any of the game itself, but
just the highlights, Dave. And I'll be honest, when I worked the All-Star break, I had chances to go to San Jose, a few other places, but I just said, you know what? Let somebody else go. You know how exhausted you are at this point in the season to get a few days strung together where you don't have to go to an airport, even if it means going to Fort Lauderdale and just chilling back and not talking to a hockey player. It's a refreshing thing. Getting back to 2000, that was the 50th All-Star Game. It was special in that regard. But from a personal perspective, the National Hockey League took care of us. I mean, the talent fee I got for doing that was pretty sizable. Not only that, I got 2 tickets at center ice right behind the penalty box, just a few rows. And my mom and dad were to go. Here's a story. My mom will shoot me for this, and my dad, rest in peace up in heaven. They got in a bit of a fight that day, and my mom just said, "Screw you, I'm taking the tickets," and brought her best friend. And I remember turning around and looking up, and there's my mom, her friend, Peter Mansbridge, and Walter Gretzky, all in the same room. It was hilarious. And my mom couldn't have cared less about hockey, but she was damn well going to piss off my dad. And she took the tickets. Way to go, Norman. Dale, sorry.
That was the golden age of media that you worked in, Henny.
It was.
Yeah. But let's hope that the All-Star experience improves and they figure out something else. You know, the NHL is certainly not alone in the issues. We talked about the NFL's Pro Bowl has moved to like a flag football competition. There's also basketball where it's just kind of a layup contest at that point because no one's trying to get hurt and it's a long season, as you mentioned. I do like that. I do like that the Pro Bowl. Yeah, baseball is great and they actually make it play for something. But I do like that the NFL does it like the week before the Super Bowl because that for players at that point don't mind going because, it's really the start of their vacation. Where like, I can understand players being asked to go for an exhibition when it's already part of a bye week. It would just be a lot better that time. And I wonder if going to a cold climate in Toronto with how cold it was this past weekend. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
So you remember, Dave, the NBA All-Star Game a few years ago and how cold it was.
Coldest day ever recorded. Like, yeah, it was, something about All-Star weekends and record low temperatures and Arctic snaps and everything. So that's why it's been in sunny climates, in the NHL one for 6 of the last 8, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see how Toronto holds up. So we'll take a break there, and when we come back, we'll look ahead to some other Leaf news and notes. The NHL trade deadline is less than a month away, and there was a lot of moves that happened that could affect the Maple Leafs in that regard. So we'll talk about that and more when we come back to Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. Rink-Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.
Naslund.
We weren't afraid of facing any line or any deep pairing because we knew that we would generate offense.
Bertuzzi.
I was like, I can play in this league and I can play a big role in this league and I can be dominant if all the stars align.
Morrison.
There was a confidence that we believed if we went out and played the way we were capable of, we could score every shift.
Their story in their words. Unreal West Coast Express. Available now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Nearly 2.5 billion people are shopping online globally, and a lot of that shopping has been done on mobile phones. So how does your business website look and function on a mobile phone? Hey, it's Ray Ferraro. Right now, my friends at North Beach, along with their partners at Craft Growth, are offering small business owners and entrepreneurs a free website digital audit. So you can find out if your website is properly optimized for a great mobile phone shopping experience. E-commerce has never been more important. So visit craftgrowth.net and get your free digital audit. That's craftgrowth.net.
And welcome back to Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's choice for free casino games, poker tips, and sports odds. And it is time for the Bodog line of the day. And Henny, it is trade season. March 3rd is the trade deadline. And I got to ask you, not including three-way trades, those will count as one, and over and under for the Toronto Maple Leafs in terms of the amount of trades that they'll make, I'll set that at 2.5. So will they go over or under 2.5 trades between now and March 3rd?
I'm going to say they're going to go over. I think they're going to do 3 trades. I think you're going to see two forwards and a defenseman. I can see a forward of some substance to add to the top 6 on the left side, which would bump Calle Jarnkrok down to the bottom 6. And I can see another depth forward, not of high repute, but of decent caliber. And I definitely see a defenseman coming to bolster what they've got right now. So I'm going to go up a half on what you've come through here, and I'm going to go 3.
Okay. That's a very specific number. So you've got a wide range there. Of course, the big trade, there were a couple trades during the All-Star weekend. One was for Jason Megna, Seattle and San Jose swinging a trade there. But the big one, of course, was Bo Horvat. That was just before the NHL All-Star Game. A first Anthony Beauvillier and her first round pick and a prospect in Atu Ratu. So that's a big haul for Bo Horvat. He wasn't signed. And then yesterday, the big bombshell comes out that Lou Lamoriello extends him to an 8-year contract at $8.5 million per. I think it's important to note that there was no signing bonus money doled out. So in later years, if it becomes a problem, you could buy it out without much of a penalty. So there is that to kind of factor in. But look, that sets the tone. And you mentioned these 3 trades here, Henny. Last year, the Toronto Maple Leafs did not give up their first round pick. At least at the deadline. They did move down a few spots to get Fraser Minton and to unload Peter Mrazek. Doesn't really count in terms of giving up a first round pick in the trade deadline sense. Does he give it up this time? Because we know, even though Kyle Dubas is only in the final year of a contract, he tends to like picking up guys with term if he's going to give up a first rounder. And if he's going to kind of go for broke with someone without term, like a Mark Giordano did, that was a couple of second rounders. So does he unload the first round pick here?
Dave, I think the first round pick is definitely up for grabs. It's going to be a late first round pick, a Travis Dermott, if you will, which was a high second round pick back in 2015. So yeah, I think it goes. I think the big question is, do they give up on Matthew Knies? And you hear mixed reviews on Matthew in terms of his potential. Yes, he could be a big star, but yes, it's going to be a while before he is one. Will he contribute immediately? Not necessarily, and probably not. So do you give that up if you're going to get somebody back with term, somebody you can count on for the years ahead, and somebody you can slot in that top six? And I think the Leafs are in a situation where that window of opportunity is limited. Maybe not, but they've got guys coming up for contract renewals over the next couple of years. So I think this year is an important one. I think their first round pick is available. I think Matthew Knies is available, providing they're able to get somebody of decency, and there are plenty of options on the table. It's not like it's a limited shelf life of talent in the National Hockey League right now. There are many, many players who can help the Toronto Maple Leafs right now, and I think they've got to go for it.
Yeah, I think they do have to go for it as well. I do see, if the first round pick does go, my guess would be someone with term, at least a year. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the Kyle Dubas playbook there, that if you're going to do that, you're alleviating, maybe some of the contract slots and decisions that you have to make for next year. At least you have some cost certainty there. I thought it was really interesting that Gary Bettman, in his media availability during All-Star Weekend, said that revenues are approaching $6 billion, which, if it's true, could substantially bring up the salary cap number next year. Instead of 1 million more, it could go up another 4.5. That was the early talk, if the projections kind of got there. So that'll help in that regard. But I think that there's a reason to go for it too, just because you look at a lot of the injuries that are kind of happening around the Maple Leafs, and from a lot of contenders. Mark Stone's another one, for example, where prices are just going to go up because these teams now had LTI space. And with Matthews on injured reserve right now, and Matt Murray is on injured reserve, and you don't know what's happening there, I think there's just space to load up. And then if they don't have space to unlock, they wait for an injury and then they activate that player.
Yeah.
That's what they did in 2021. The Zach Hyman, Zach Bogosian injuries to activate Frederik Andersen on the final game of the regular season is the example I'm pointing to there. Is a way to do it. But when you look at the record amount of LTI that all these teams are under, I don't see the Leafs just staying with the status quo and not loading up and using other guys' space and then just worrying about it until the playoffs. It's going to be a real arms race, and it's going to cost assets. And while I've said it in the last podcast, and I still agree with it, get these guys, activate them later, but then make sure everyone knows what the role is after the trade deadline. No more mixing and matching lines anymore. Like, have your defense pairs set, have your lines set, know what they are, barring injuries, of course, and kind of go for it. I think that's kind of what you have to do. And then I guess the next question, you mentioned it in the first segment that you weren't happy with Ilya Samsonov's performance. Are the Leafs just okay to just stick with these two and not get a David Riddick type insurance piece?
I think, yes. I think you stick with these two guys. They've got you this far. I mean, that's a tough one. It just seems like Kyle's always sort of rolling the dice on the goaltending, right? And hoping for the best. I think with the team in front, if they are relatively healthy, playing the way they have defensively, I think that's more than good enough to have a Samsonov and hopefully a healthy Murray as well to get you through. I think it's good. And I don't know if it's worth what do you do, or whether they have room to add a third goaltender. I just think you've got to roll the dice with what you've got. Again, fifth best record in the National Hockey League with a club that's leading the entire league in man games lost to injury. We can take Victor Mete and a few of those guys out. They're still going to be high up there. And the Bruins and Hurricanes haven't been there. As far as, other teams in the arms race, I don't know what Tampa can do. I don't know what Julian Brisebois can do, given all they to get them to where they are. Is there anything left in the cupboard? They always seem to find a way to tweak it, but I'm just not sure they're going to be able to do it. And the same goes for the Boston Bruins. You've got to find room to fit some new players, but both teams, especially Boston, I think have to add. And Carolina's got some space. They're definitely going to add. They may be the odds-on favorite to win out of the East and go to the Stanley Cup final. That's me talking in early February right now. But the Leafs are right there. And they've got to add and find a way, somehow to do it. And if that means sacrificing a bit of the future in a first-round pick or a Matthew Nyes, I think you've got to do it.
Yeah, so looking at Boston's cap situation, they've got about $3.25 billion in space right now. So they've got that. Plus they don't have their second round picks for 2023 or 24, but they have their first round pick for the next 3 years. And then they've got their picks from rounds 3 through 6 after that. So there is that. Jake DeBrusk is their guy on LTI right now.
Yeah.
That is accounting for a lot of that space. So, just given the fact that I saw him wearing this crazy brace when he was pumping up, the team lineup recently, doesn't sound like he's come back anytime soon. And just looking at Tampa there for you, I think Tampa's got not a lot of space. You're only like 7. And they also have their first couple of first round picks committed for 2023 and 2024 right now from the trade they did last year at the deadline. So that's when they got Brendan, some trade deadline acquisition. I forgot that at the time. So you're right in the sense that it's probably going to be smaller assets there, but I don't. Your favorite friend Nick Paul. And the little pieces, right? So,
yeah,
that's essentially what it is. We'll see. But Boston's the one that scares me because they still act and they don't really need to. And that's going to be a very interesting one. And it's amazing the goalie tandem that they've established with Linus Ullmark, who I remember was just kind of floundering in Buffalo, and has really, kind of found his game. Similar to how Matt Murray was kind of finding his game, at least earlier in the season, where you put goalies in a better system situation and they can thrive. So we mentioned goaltenders. Joe Wall, someone I want to in there and see if what he's learned over the past year can make him an everyday league. There is that. The Leafs, certainly they've got the one contract slot right now. A lot of LTIs, so they would have to give up some pieces. But I don't know. Let's look ahead to the schedule for the Maple Leafs right now, because they're actually starting with not a heavy opponent, sort of like a strength of schedule here. They've got a couple of games back to back against the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are, if not the worst, they're among there. They're certainly in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. And then you've got Montreal, Chicago, and then you got Buffalo, who's supposed to be a little bit better as they're knocking on the door in playoff spot now. What do we expect? Because as we mentioned off the top here, Eddie, this team has struggled out of the gate when it comes to playing lesser than opponents. How do you come back fresh and set the tone properly against a team like the Jackets?
Well, nothing like a memory of a game against the Boston Bruins to help sort of push you forward and be a catalyst. Also, with the fact that they don't necessarily play well against teams much lower than them in the standings, and that these other teams are going to come out motivated as well. So you've got to play to win them all. The Buffalo game will be difficult. They've done a tremendous job, but, maybe no Tage Thompson, I guess, and there will be no Austin Matthews. So that said, Toronto should still be good enough to win every one of those games. Now, I don't think they're going to win every one of those games, the NHL being what it is, but the Leafs have got to just build on what they've been managing to do, solidify home ice advantage if they can for the first round of that playoffs, and every 2 points is going to be so important. You look back to the injuries to Austin and just Matt Murray and the break and all of this stuff. It couldn't have happened at a better time, and especially strength of schedule. Take advantage of this, add points, eventually get ready to add some talent as we approach the March 3rd trade deadline and get ready for what will be a memorable run in mid-March to mid-April and go from there. So I think it's a good part of the season for them. But go out and win those hockey games because you should. Without a doubt, they should.
So the Buffalo Sabres 6-2-2 in their last 10 games, 26-20-4. So there's certainly they're far back, like 9 points back of Tampa for third. However, their goal differential is 16, which is better than the wild card teams that are currently in spots. That's Washington and Pittsburgh. So certainly they're right there in terms of trying to get one of those like last wild card spots. And then with Boston being better than Carolina, it would be potentially Buffalo, if they could get the first wild card spot, having an interesting first round matchup against the Boston Bruins should that hold. But that'll be interesting. How the Leafs will look without Austin Matthews for the foreseeable future will be interesting. The Matt Murray one, we should get some clarity there on his ankle injury when the Leafs do return to practice on February 9th in Toronto before they head out to Columbus for a pair of back-to-back games. That's going to do it for Paul Hendrick. I'm David Alter. Thank you for listening to Rink Wide Toronto. Make sure you subscribe and rate on all your favorite podcast platforms to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. From sports odds to free casino games, make a play at bodog.net. This has been Rink Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.
Hey, it's Ray Ferraro and Darren Drager from the Ray and Drakes Hockey Podcast. Drakes, we're getting into your favorite part of the year. It's insider season.
Yeah, the March 3rd trade deadline is in sight, and general managers' phones are ringing as front offices are trying to figure out what they're doing, buyers, sellers, and the storylines, Ray, and the trade rumors, they're blowing up now across the league.
Yeah, we got it all covered, Drakes, along with the top hockey guests, twice weekly, here on the Ray and Drakes Hockey Podcast. Check us out everywhere you get your podcasts.